Section 7.4, I had a copy of the solution on Canvas. So I think the best thing is for you to print a copy of that while you're watching this video. And here we discuss how to add and subtract and also multiply or divide radicals, okay? So the first problem is how to add and subtract. When it comes to addition and subtractions, let's say if I have here, if I want to add radical 5, 2 radical 5, and 7 radical 5, when it comes to additions, you want to make sure that radicals are identicals. It's like, what if you take 2a and want to add to 7a? Isn't this 9a? Same thing applies for radicals. It's just these two radicals must be identical and also the prime. So that would be 9 radical 5. Let's say you have 7 radical 3, and you have like 5 radicals 3. You want to subtract these two. As long as the radical parts are identical, you could subtract. So that would be like 2 radical 3. So that for addition and subtraction of the radical, again, you want to make sure that these two. Now, you should also pay attention to, like, let's say I have something like this. I have like 2 radical 5, okay, and here I have radical 125. I cannot tell, well, these two are not equal, so I cannot add. No, you have to have a number here that you cannot factor anymore. Means here, in case of radical 125, you should see what numbers are in 125. If I take that and divide by 5, what is 125 divided by 5 is 25, and then 5, and then 5, right? So 125 is 5 to power of 3, or is 5 to power of 2 times 5. So in that case, instead of radical 125, I write 5 to power of 2 times 5. And then this 5 is coming out of the radical because the power and the root are the same. So now you see, now you have 2 radicals that are equal. So that would be 7 radical 5, okay? So if you see a number under the radical, first make sure that you cannot simplify. If you cannot simplify it, then yes. For instance here, say I have 7 radical 3 minus 10 radical 2. No, I cannot subtract these two. Why not? Because these two radicals are not equal, and there's no other, you cannot take any more number out of these. So this, no, you cannot subtract, okay? So again, for addition and subtractions, that's what we do. We try to have the same radical, a number under the radical should be not exactly the prime number, it's just a number that you cannot remove any more factor out of it. That's not the case for multiplication. For multiplications, if you have radical 2 and you want to multiply by radical 3, then all you need to do is combine into one radical, which is 2 times 3 or radical 6. You could always combine it, okay? So here, first I see none of these radicals are equal, right? So I try to simplify each. I break 48. 48 is this, 32, and 75. So when you break all these numbers, then what you see is this. So 48 now is that. And this is 32. This one is 75. So if you start taking numbers out of the radical, this is what you see. See, 2 to the power of 4. 2 goes to 4 2 times. So 2 to the power of 2 released from the radical. Same thing here. 5 to the power of 2. 2 and 2 cancel. 5 is released from the. Now you look and you see the only like terms is this 2 here, these 2, which is 12 radical 3 and 5 radical 3. These 2 both have the same radical. So 12 minus 5 is 7 radical 3 minus 8 radical 2. See, now these 2 radicals are not the same, so you cannot subtract. Same thing. We try to b to power of 3, I write it as b to power of 2 times b to power of 1. Same thing. Then 36 is 6 to power of 2, or 16 is 4 to power of 2, or 9 is 3 to power of 2. Then I start taking number of variables out of the radical. See, 6 and b, these 2 are coming out. This b remain because the power is 1, is less. Same thing here. Now notice they all have this part in common. Look, b radical b, b radical b, b radical b. It's like you have 6 item here, 4 item, and minus 3 item. They all these 3 items are equal. So you add and subtract, and that give you 7 items. So what that means, 6 and 4 is 10, minus 3 is 7. B radical b. So the process of these problems are very similar. So you break 75, you break 28, you break 27, you start taking numbers out of the radicals, you see. And these 2, they both have radical 3. 50 minus 21 is 29 radical 3. 8 radical 7, I don't see any other radical 7, so that would stay here. B to power of 5th, you write it as b to power of 4 times b. Why? Because the root is 2. You want to write a number here or a power here which is divisible by 2. So if you have an odd number and the root is even, like 2, instead of b to power of 5, you write b to power of 4 times b. And b to power of 4, 4 divided by 2 is 2. So b2 is released from the radical. See, b2 is released from the radical. Same thing here. You see there is b5. b5, you write it as b4 times b. b4, when it comes out of the radical, is b2. So you see they all have the same part. They all have this part in common. It's like you have 5 minus 5, these 2 cancel, so all is left is this. These 2 cancel, right? Or equal and opposite, the opposite side. See here, like in this one at the end, they all have y cubic root of 5x. They both have the same denominator. So I put one denominator. Then I try to work with this one. It's 27 is 3 to the power of 3, x to the power of 4. Because this is 3, write this as x 3 times x, and then start taking 3 and x out. Now look, the top, they both have x cubic root of x cubic root of x. So is that. Now this is multiplications. When you see this to power of 2, instead of to power of 2, you could write it as this parenthesis multiplied by itself. It's the same thing, right? So So what if you have a to power of 2, you could write it as a times a. That's what you're doing here. So if you have two parentheses, let's say you have x minus y and you have x plus y, something like that. So there are several ways to do the multiplication. We practiced in an earlier chapter. Is that one is just you start from the first one and you distribute. You take this and multiply by these two, and then you take that one and multiply by second one. Okay, so we do the same thing here. First, we take radical 3 and times radical 3. What is radical 3 times radical 3? Look, radical 3 times radical 3 is radical 3 times 3, or just say radical 3 to power of 2, which is just 3. That means if you take a radical and multiply by itself, what it does, it just remove the 5 from the radical. That's what it is. Because why? Because this becomes radical 25, right? Which is 5. So what is radical x times radical x? X. What is radical AB times radical AB? That's AB. So again, if you take a number or variable and multiply by itself, what it does is just remove the radical. So here, when I take the radical 3, I want to distribute radical 3 into this. What is radical 3 times radical 3 is, so you don't have to go through all this, you just put 3 here. Then I take radical 3 and times minus radical 7, okay? So let's think of this one. Let's think of this part. Let's say you take radical 7 and radical 3, and let's keep this minus here. What is this? This is radical 21, okay? And then there is a negative here. And these two are the same, so you have 2 of this. Is radical 21, right? And you don't see any number here, means it's just 1. You have radical 21 and another radical 21, you have 2 radical 21. And then at the end, 7 and 10 add, so it has this. So let's just add that one here, that if you have radical A times radical A is always A. If you have radical x times radical x is x. If you have radical 5 times radical 5 is 5. If you have radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. Same thing. You take the 8 radical x and distribute. So when you take 8 radical x and you want to multiply that by 6 radical x, you know, this is like this. 8a, what is 8a times 6a, right? Is you multiply these two, is 48, and a times a is a2. See the same thing here. When you multiply these two, you have 48 radical x2. But you understand radical x2 is x is coming out, is just the x. So the whole thing is 48x. So here, so you are taking 8 radical x times 6 radical x is 48, and eventually it's 48x. 8 radical x times 8. Always multiply numbers and variables separately. So if I have 8 radical x and I want to multiply that by 8, you just multiply the numbers, which is 64, and there is only one radical here, so you just write that next to it, okay? Always combine radical and numbers separately. Like here, when I distribute minus 8 to this, minus 8 times 6 is minus 48 and just the radical x. Okay. So the same thing, 3 radical 3 times radical 3 is just the 9. Okay, that's section 7.4.